Welcome to the official channel of Prosper Anang Ministries. Step into a powerful journey of faith, inspiration, and spiritual growth with Pastor Prosper, a privileged servant of Jesus. As the lead pastor of the New Testament Gospel Church in Benin City, Nigeria, Pastor Prosper is on a global mission to transform lives. He is an author, writer, fluently sharing God's Word, deep, life-changing insights right to your screen. If you are seeking spiritual guidance, a vibrant faith with God, you are in the right place.
What if the harder you try to actually be a good person, the further you get from becoming one?
Right. It sounds a bit backward, doesn't it?
It really does. But think about the sheer exhausting theater of it all. I mean, I'm talking about that constant background hum of managing your moral PR.
Oh, the moral PR. Yeah, that is a heavy lift.
It is. We spend a staggering amount of energy curating this image of integrity, for our colleagues, our families, our communities. It's like a relentless treadmill. You're constantly scanning the room, calculating how your actions are perceived, and just frantically adjusting your behavior so the mask doesn't slip.
It's a profound psychological burden, really. Because when your primary objective is just maintaining an appearance of goodness, you are essentially functioning as a full-time crisis manager for your own ego.
A crisis manager, wow, yeah.
You're trapped in this endless loop of performance. And, well, the fundamental flaw with any performance is that it requires an audience.
Right. You need people clapping, or at least approving.
Exactly. If your moral compass is entirely calibrated to how other people view you, you're living in a deeply fragile state. The moment that audience turns hostile, or the moment you are completely alone, all that carefully constructed scaffolding just tends to collapse.
And that collapse is exactly what we are dissecting today.
Yeah.
We are looking for the exit sign from that theater of performance, because how do you stop acting like a good person and actually undergo a rewiring so profound that authenticity just, becomes your default state?
Which is the ultimate goal.
Exactly. So to figure that out, we are diving into a text that provides a highly specific architectural blueprint for character transformation.
And the source text for our analysis today is a specific entry from today's Word for You devotional by Pastor Prosper Anang.
That's right.
We are examining the entry dated Tuesday, the 30th of June, 2026. And the theme Pastor Prosper Anang tackles here is titled Godliness, reflecting the character of Christ.
Now, I know the word godliness carries a lot of baggage for some people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for many, it immediately conjures up these images of stiff, rule-bound, joyless, religious compliance, just following rules.
Right, staring severely over the top of your glasses at people having fun.
Exactly. But the author argues that this cultural understanding is fundamentally flawed. So the mission of this deep dive is to explore what the text calls the law of addition. We want to analyze the psychological and spiritual mechanics of how a human being transitions from that white-knuckle moral discipline to a state of natural, unforced character.
And to understand the mechanics of that transition, Pastor Prosper Anang anchors his argument in a passage from the New Testament, specifically 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 7.
Okay, let's break that down.
So he presents this text as a sequential 8-block ladder of spiritual maturity. And the concept he introduces here, the law of addition, is critical because it insists that growth isn't random. It is deeply structural.
Yeah, I am looking at this ladder in the text right now, and the sequence is incredibly rigid. It starts with faith. Then you add goodness, or virtue, then knowledge, then self-control, then perseverance, then godliness, then mutual affection, and finally, love.
It's a very specific progression.
It really is, and the specific devotional entry we are analyzing today represents day sets of this journey, isolating that pivot point of godliness. But before we get to step 6, I kind of have to question the premise of the ladder itself.
Oh, go on.
Well, why is there a ladder at all? I mean, in a lot of contemporary circles, the narrative is that simply believing, just having faith, is the finish line. You believe, and you're done.
Right. The text aggressively challenges that narrative.
Yeah.
Pastor Prosper Anang establishes what he calls the foundational scriptural law, arguing that faith is merely the activation sequence. It's essentially the pouring of the concrete foundation.
So it's just the start,
Exactly. A foundation is essential, obviously, but you cannot live in it. It offers no shelter on its own. The law of addition dictates a relentless, sequential building process where each new block requires the structural integrity of the previous one to bear the weight.
Let's test the weight of those blocks then. If faith is the concrete slab, the text says the first thing you build on it is virtue, which is defined here as moral excellence.
And from a psychological standpoint, this makes perfect sense. You have a foundational trust, but that trust must immediately be translated into a structural framework of integrity.
You have to act on it.
Right. Virtue is the ethical boundary line.
Right.
But Pastor Prosper Anang points out that virtue on its own is insufficient because it can easily become misguided zeal or, toxic perfectionism if it lacks the next block, which is knowledge.
So knowledge acts as a sort of calibration tool then.
Precisely.
You have the moral energy of virtue, but knowledge gives it intellectual depth and spiritual context. It teaches you why a boundary exists rather than just forcing you to blindly respect it.
And once you have that calibrated understanding, you inevitably encounter a severe internal conflict.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, because your new knowledge clashes violently with your old habits and impulses, and this necessitates the next block, self-control. The text frames this as the discipline of desires. You now have the intellectual architecture of what is right, and you must force your physical and emotional responses into alignment with it.
Which sounds suspiciously like the exhausting PR management we were talking about earlier. I mean, forcing your impulses into a box takes a massive toll on the nervous system.
It does, which is exactly why self-control is fundamentally unsustainable as a long-term strategy unless it is forged into the next block on the ladder, which is perseverance.
This feels like the real bottleneck here. The text defines perseverance as maintaining that self-control when the environment turns hostile.
Right, when it's not easy anymore.
Yeah. But why is this specific sequence, forcing self-control through the crucible of perseverance, the mandatory prerequisite for reaching the sixth block, godliness?
Because authentic transformation cannot be verified in a controlled environment. The devotional argues that true God consciousness is forged exclusively through trials.
It has to be tested.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is relatively simple to maintain an intellectual awareness of a higher power when your life is perfectly comfortable. But perseverance is the mechanism that burns away the theoretical. It forces a person to maintain their moral architecture when obedience brings them actual, tangible disadvantage.
Oh, wow. So it's the difference between speculative trust and experiential trust.
That's a brilliant way to put it.
It's like if I'm going skydiving, speculative trust is reading the manufacturer's manual for the parachute.
Right. You're studying the specs.
Exactly. I understand the tensile strength of the nylon. I believe intellectually that it will hold my weight. But experiential trust is the terrifying freefall. It is jumping out of the aircraft, pulling the cord, and feeling the harness actually catch you.
And that free fall is the perfect analog for perseverance. You're hanging in the void between the jump and the deployment.
Waiting to see if it actually works.
Right. And the text argues that many believers remain in a state of nominal superficial faith because they refuse to jump. They have the manual, they have the speculative trust, but they have never allowed their faith to be tested to the absolute breaking point where only the character of God could catch them.
And when you survive that free fall, your brain completely rewires how it views the parachute. You no longer just believe it works, you know it works.
Yes, that shift from theoretical belief to lived reality is what the text identifies as godliness. Pastor Prosper Anang positions godliness as the grand pivot point of the entire 2 Peter ladder.
The pivot point.
Yeah, because up until this point, virtue, knowledge, self-control, perseverance, the development has been almost entirely internal and hidden. They are personal disciplines. But godliness is the moment where that hidden internal forging suddenly becomes a visible, undeniable reality to the outside world. It is the transition from personal survival to public witness.
If this is the pivot point, we really need to get incredibly precise about what godliness actually means because the cultural definition is so distorted. The text introduces the original Greek term used in the epistles, eusebia.
Yes, eusebia is a very complex word conveying reverence, piety, and most importantly for our analysis, a profound God consciousness.
And the devotional is very quick to point out what Eusebi is not. It is not an aesthetic. It is not adopting a pious vocabulary or dressing a certain way or, performing a set of religious rituals for public consumption. That brings us right back to the theater of performance.
It is the trap of conflating the hardware with the operating system.
Oh, I like this.
When people attempt to manufacture godliness through external behavior, they're essentially buying a rugged, military-grade phone case. It looks impenetrable. It looks ready to survive a disaster. But if the actual operating system inside the phone is corrupted or the battery is dead, that external armor is entirely useless when you actually try to make a call.
I want to push that analogy even further because an operating system doesn't just sit there. It dictates every single background process.
It runs everything.
Right. It allocates memory, it manages battery life, it determines how the hardware interacts with external stimuli. If godliness is the operating system, it means it is running in the background of every single decision, regardless of whether an app is open on the screen for people to see.
That is exactly the core argument of today's Word for You devotional by Pastor Prosper Anang. Godliness is not the app you open when you walk into a religious setting. It is the OS running the entire device. There is a specific quote from the text that crystallizes this perfectly.
I actually have it right here. Let me read it. Pastor Prosper Anang's Pipe quote for today's devotional is, "Godliness is not about looking holy. It is about living conscious of His holiness and letting that consciousness transform every decision, every word, and every action into a mirror of Christ's character."
That is so powerful. The psychological weight of that quote rests on the phrase, living conscious of His holiness.
Conscious of His holiness.
Yes, because if we go back to the idea of the exhausting moral PR campaign, the exhaustion comes from trying to appease a fickle human audience. Human standards are contradictory and they're constantly shifting, but true God consciousness changes the audience entirely. It creates a permanent awareness of an ultimate, unchanging observer.
So it removes the variable of human opinion.
Entirely.
If your OS is permanently tracking with a singular, ultimate standard of holiness, you stop calculating how your actions look to your peers, and you start evaluating how they actually exist in objective reality. The relief of that must be immense. You no longer have to remember which mask you are wearing for which group of people.
It eradicates the double life. And the text systematically breaks down how this new operating system manifests in human behavior, dividing it into 3 distinct dimensions.
Okay, let's go through those.
The first is vertical godliness.
The vertical dimension. The text ties this to Psalm 111.10, stating that reverence toward God, this vertical awareness, is the beginning of wisdom. So how does this vertical alignment actually change behavior on the ground?
It enforces absolute consistency between the private space and the public space. Pastor Prosper Anang notes that a person cannot possess genuine vertical godliness if they are commanding moral authority in a public setting, while simultaneously engaging in corrupt commerce or hidden vices in private.
They can exist in 2 different realities.
Right. Vertical godliness means recognizing that the private space doesn't actually exist. The ultimate audience is always present.
Which means the very concept of a secret is a psychological illusion.
Exactly.
If you are operating under the delusion of secrecy, your OS is fundamentally corrupted. So if the vertical dimension enforces consistency, what does the second dimension, inward godliness, accomplish?
The text describes inward godliness as the creation of a God-shaped heart. This is where the internal motivations are completely overhauled. The devotional outlines 4 specific, highly radical psychological shifts that occur when this dimension is activated.
Let's analyze those shifts because they sound completely counter to basic human survival instincts. First, it claims desires move from selfish ambition to kingdom purpose. Second, motivations shift from seeking recognition to glorifying God. Third, values change from temporal security to eternal significance. And fourth, affections move from being rooted in the earth to being fixed on heaven.
That third shift is particularly jarring for a modern audience. Abandoning temporal security for eternal significance.
I mean, from a biological and sociological standpoint, a human being is wired to hoard temporal security.
We absolutely are.
We are obsessed with building financial fortresses, securing our social status, and just eliminating risk wherever we can.
It is the entire basis of the modern economy.
Yes.
But inward godliness introduces a radically different value matrix. It argues that hoarding temporary safety is a waste of energy because the timeline of human existence extends infinitely beyond the temporal.
It completely reevaluates risk.
Yes. When eternal significance becomes the primary value, a person might make decisions that look incredibly foolish to a secular observer.
Like what?
Well, like giving away a vast portion of their wealth or refusing a lucrative promotion because it compromises their integrity.
Because they are no longer playing the short game, they've zoomed out.
Exactly.
And that massive internal shift naturally bleeds into the third dimension, which the text calls outward godliness. This is the observable conduct.
And the text provides very specific markers for this outward dimension. It includes maintaining integrity even when it results in personal loss, showing compassion to the vulnerable without broadcasting it for social credit, championing justice for the oppressed when it's unpopular, and demonstrating profound humility.
I am looking at this list: integrity, hidden compassion, justice, humility, and I have to ask the obvious question. How is this not just another exhausting to-do list?
It's a fair question.
I mean, we started the step dive talking about the trap of performing goodness. If I am constantly monitoring myself to make sure I am championing the oppressed and hiding my charitable donations, aren't I just back on the treadmill of legalism?
The text explicitly defends against this critique. Pastor Prosper Anang states clearly that this is not a return to legalistic performance. The difference lies entirely in the mechanics of causality.
The mechanics of causality. Tell me more.
Legalism is an outside-in mechanism. You force your external behavior to conform to a checklist in an attempt to manufacture a feeling of righteousness or to earn the approval of the audience.
It is trying to charge the dead phone battery by rubbing the rugged case.
Precisely. It doesn't work. But the outward godliness described here is an inside-out phenomenon. It is an involuntary byproduct.
Involuntary.
Yes. If your inward values have genuinely shifted from hoarding temporal wealth to valuing eternal significance, generosity ceases to be a rule you have to follow. It becomes a logical consequence of how you view money. You do not have to force yourself to be generous any more than you have to force yourself to breathe.
Ah, I see. The conduct is just the reality of the operating system leaking into the physical world.
That's exactly it.
This brings us to what might be the most fascinating psychological insight in the entire text. It is a concept the devotional calls the godliness paradox. Yes, this paradox addresses the sheer terror of interacting with absolute moral perfection.
Logically, you would assume that the closer a flawed human being gets to a standard of absolute, unyielding holiness, the more neurotic and terrified they would become. I mean, if I'm standing next to flawless perfection, every single microscopic flaw in my own character is going to be magnified 1,000 times.
It's daunting.
It should induce a paralyzing panic attack of self-scrutiny.
And initially it does. The text illustrates this using the historical account of the prophet Isaiah from Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah experiences a profound vision of the divine throne room. He encounters the Lord, high and exalted.
And his immediate reaction is not to pull out his scroll and list his theological credentials. No, definitely not. His reaction is absolute psychological devastation. He declares, "Woe is me, I am ruined." In the blinding radiation of true holiness, the entire scaffolding of his personal righteousness disintegrates instantly. He is crushed by the terrifying clarity of his own unworthiness.
But here is where the paradox activates. The text points out that this absolute destruction of his ego is not the end of the story. It's actually the necessary precursor to profound liberation.
Liberation, yes.
I want to zero in on a very specific phrase Pastor Prosper Anang uses here. He writes, "True godliness is always preceded by the death of self-importance."
The death of self-importance.
Yes.
If we unpack that against the backdrop of modern culture, it is deeply subversive.
Subversive is putting it mildly. We exist in an ecosystem where self-importance is not a personality flaw. It is the dominant currency.
Right, personal branding.
Exactly. You are told to build your brand, assert your truth, control your narrative, and never let anyone diminish your shine. The idea that you must proactively oversee the execution of your own self-importance sounds like career suicide.
It is the total surrender of the PR department.
Yes.
But consider the psychological relief on the other side of that death. When Isaiah accepts that he brings absolutely zero intrinsic righteousness to the table, he no longer has anything to prove. The crushing burden of image management vanishes because the image he was trying to manage has been exposed as worthless anyway.
It is the ultimate freedom. If you have already accepted that you are flawed and reliant entirely on external grace, you can't be blackmailed by the fear of being found out. The worst thing about you is already known by the only audience that matters.
And that realization is what transforms a person's conduct from a theatrical performance into a living testimony.
So practical.
Very. And to ground this theory, the text moves away from ancient prophets and applies this operating system to 3 highly relatable modern scenarios.
And the marketplace application.
Exactly.
The devotional provides 3 archetypes to show what this looks like in the wild. The first is the business person.
According to the text, a business person operating with this new OS refuses to cut corners to artificially inflate profit margins. They reject deceptive marketing tactics and refuse to exploit their workforce to lower overhead.
But the critical factor is their motivation. They are not avoiding exploitation because they are terrified of a sudden audit by the tax authorities or, because they are afraid of a viral PR disaster on social media.
Their ethical boundaries aren't dictated by the threat of human consequence.
Right. They operate this way because of that vertical dimension, eternal God consciousness. They view their boardroom as a sacred space where their decisions echo into eternity.
It effectively demolishes the imaginary wall between secular work and spiritual worship.
It really does. What's the second archetype?
The second archetype is the parent. This is an environment fraught with intense power dynamics. The godly parent, the text argues, does not govern their household through intimidation, fear, or arbitrary favoritism. They model integrity, keep their promises, and critically, they demonstrate the capacity to admit their mistakes.
I want to dissect that specific point. A parent admitting a mistake. Because the pressure to maintain an illusion of flawless competence is arguably highest in parenting.
Oh, without a doubt.
You are the ultimate authority figure in that micro-society. For a parent to sit down with a child and say, I handled that poorly, I lost my temper, and I was wrong to do so, that requires an unbelievable subversion of the traditional power dynamic.
It is a real-time demonstration of the death of self-importance.
Exactly. The parent is choosing vulnerability over the preservation of their authority. It sends a profound message to the child. I am not performing perfection for you. I am accountable to a higher standard of truth, and when I violate that standard, I must repent, even to you.
Which is incredible. It proves that the parent's audience is God, not their own offspring.
It completely revolutionizes the moral ecosystem of the family.
It really does. And the final archetype is the young person dating.
Okay, dating, that's a minefield.
It is. The text describes a young person navigating a culture saturated with fluid boundaries and transactional intimacy. This individual chooses to guard their heart and physical boundaries, but again, the motivation is paramount.
It always comes back to motivation.
Right. They are not operating out of a servile fear of punishment or a rigid adherence to purity culture legalism. Their boundaries are an organic byproduct of their reverence for God and a profound respect for their future spouse.
They refuse to let the consensus of their peers override their internal operating system.
Exactly.
So the text has successfully diagnosed the problem of performance, it's laid out the architectural blueprint of addition, and shown us what the finished product looks like in the marketplace. The obvious question for anyone listening is, how do I actually install this OS?
Well, Pastor Prosper Anang provides a highly pragmatic 5-step pathway to deepening this level of godliness.
Okay, let's walk through those steps.
These are not theoretical concepts. They are daily actionable practices designed to cultivate and sustain God consciousness. The first step on this pathway is to cultivate silence. The text grounds this in Psalm 46.10, the command to be still and know that I am God.
I find it really telling that silence is the very first requirement. We are terrified of silence.
We are.
Our modern environment is engineered to eliminate it completely. The second we feel a lull, we flood our senses with notifications, music, or just background noise. Why? Because silence forces us to listen to our own internal monologue, which is usually racing with anxiety about our image management.
Silence is the deliberate dismantling of the audience.
Oh, that's good.
The text clarifies that this is not secular mindfulness designed to optimize your blood pressure so you can return to the marketplace and crush your competitors. It is the practice of stripping away external stimuli so you can orient yourself to the only presence that actually matters.
Step 2 is to guard your heart, referencing Proverbs 4.23. The devotional insists on a ruthless audit of what a person consumes: media, relationships, content.
This requires high-level cognitive behavioral management. The question isn't simply, is this content inherently evil? The diagnostic question the text implies is, does engaging with this specific relationship or consuming this specific media cultivate my reverence for God? Or does it feed my cynicism and my ego?
It is an aggressive curation of your psychological diet.
That's a great way to frame it.
Step 3 takes us into incredibly uncomfortable territory. Practice radical honesty. The text mandates the immediate confession of sin, pointing to Psalm 66.18, which warns that cherishing sin in the heart blocks communication with the divine.
The psychology of hidden guilt is fascinating here. Unresolved guilt acts as a cognitive barrier. When you carry a secret moral failure, your brain instinctively drives you back into a defensive posture.
Start performing again.
Exactly. You start performing to compensate for the hidden flaw. Radical, immediate honesty short-circuits that process. It prevents the guilt from metastasizing into a full-blown double life.
You cannot maintain God consciousness while you are actively hiding from him in the bushes.
Spot on.
Step 4 is to study God's character. The instruction is to engage with Scripture for the explicit purpose of transformation, not merely information acquisition.
It warns against the intellectualization of faith.
Right, just gathering facts.
Yeah. Accumulating theological data points so you can win a debate or sound impressive in a study group is just another form of self-important performance. The goal of studying the text is to encounter the raw character of the divine aside, the justice, the mercy, the sovereignty, so that the Isaiah principle activates, shattering your ego and deepening your reverence.
And that leads perfectly into the 5th and final step of the pathway, which might be the most difficult pill to swallow in our current cultural moment. Submit to correction. The devotional states unequivocally that a godly person is a correctable person. They seek counsel, they pivot when they are wrong, and they openly acknowledge their blind spots.
Let's analyze why this is so culturally abrasive right now. We live in an era that valorizes absolute intellectual autonomy. Yielding your position, apologizing, or admitting that someone else's perspective is more accurate than your own is frequently framed as weakness.
We are taught to double down and defend our narrative at all costs.
Always.
So how does the text dismantle that instinct?
By returning to the foundational premise, the death of self-importance. A person who refuses to be corrected is a person who fundamentally believes their own perspective is infallible. They are essentially demanding that reality conform to their ego.
Wow.
The godly person recognizes the inherent limitations of their own human hardware. Submitting to correction is the ultimate tangible proof that you value objective truth over the fragile preservation of your own pride.
It proves you care more about navigating the ship safely than pretending you always knew the way.
That's a brilliant summary.
Now, after laying out this intensive psychological and spiritual pathway, today's Word for You devotional by Pastor Prosper Anang transitions from passive instruction into active vocal engagement. The text provides a series of declarations and intercessions designed to anchor these concepts in reality.
Yes. The devotional shifts into a highly structured segment containing 3 Speak Life declarations, an apostolic legislative decree, and scriptures for further jurisdictional study.
Let's unpack the psychology of the Speak Life declarations. The first one reads, I am becoming increasingly God-conscious, and this reverence shapes every dimension of my life, my thoughts, my choices, my conduct, and my character. Why the emphasis on speaking this aloud?
Speaking a truth aloud moves it from the realm of abstract thought into the physical environment. It forces the brain to process the commitment auditorily. This first declaration serves to continually recalibrate the operating system, reminding the individual that their conduct is not a separate entity from their internal reverence. It is the direct output of it.
The second declaration tackles the issue of the double life head-on. My private world and my public witness are aligned. I refuse the hypocrisy of compartmentalized faith. I am wholly committed to reflecting Christ's character in secret and in plain sight.
This is an aggressive boundary-setting exercise. The term compartmentalized faith perfectly describes the modern coping mechanism for spiritual dissonance. We put our professional ethics in one box, our private entertainment in another, and our religious observance in a third.
We just separate it all.
Exactly. Refusing that compartmentalization is a demand for total integration. It is the refusal to fracture your own identity.
The third declaration states, the reverence of God is reshaping my desires, my values, and my affections. I am no longer bound by the temporal. I am becoming rooted in the eternal.
This anchors the internal shift we discussed earlier regarding the God-shaped heart. It is a daily renunciation of the anxiety that comes from obsessing over temporal security.
Following these declarations, the text presents a section titled Personalized Spiritual Warfare Declaration, framed as Pastor Prosper Anang's prophetic prayer for his global audience.
And the language here is striking. It moves from personal affirmation to what sounds like legal spiritual legislation.
The tone is incredibly authoritative. It treats the struggle against performance not merely as a psychological hurdle, but as a spiritual conflict requiring decisive intervention.
Exactly.
I am looking at a specific line here. He decrees, by the authority of Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit, that every spirit of hypocrisy is broken and cast down. And then he targets a very specific internal voice, the spirit of compromise that whispers, "No one will know. I declare it silenced and severed."
That whisper, "no one will know," is the absolute genesis of the double life. It is the lie that enables the compartmentalization we just talked about. By declaring that voice silenced, the prayer is actively attempting to sever the psychological loophole that allows a person to maintain a hidden, corrupt private life while projecting a pristine public image.
He counters that whisper with a fascinating claim. The grace of God is sufficient to sanctify every secret place. It suggests that grace isn't just a mechanism for forgiving public failures, but a force capable of sanitizing the darkest, most hidden architecture of a person's mind.
There is another distinction in this prayer that requires deep analysis. He prays that the audience will operate in filial reverence rather than servile fear.
That is perhaps the most vital theological distinction in the entire devotional.
It really is. If you misinterpret this, the entire operating system crashes. Servile fear is the sheer terror a prisoner feels toward a sadistic warden. It is a compliance rooted entirely in the anticipation of violent punishment.
If you operate out of servile fear, you are right back to performing. You are just performing to avoid a beating. It generates massive resentment.
Exactly. It creates a toxic, anxiety-ridden relationship. Filial reverence, however, is the profound respect and awe a mature child has for an incredibly loving, wise parent. It is the fear of breaking the heart of someone who has given you everything.
That's a beautiful distinction.
The obedience that flows from filial reverence is born out of deep affection and a desire to emulate the character of the parent, not out of a desperate attempt to avoid their wrath.
The prayer concludes with a vision of corporate integrity spreading across homes and workplaces, predicting a generation known not merely for doctrine, but for godliness.
A powerful vision.
Finally, the text anchors this entire thesis with a further jurisdictional study section, providing two specific biblical passages.
These texts serve as the constitutional foundation for everything discussed. The first is Isaiah 9.67, which speaks of the child being born and states, "The government will be on his shoulders."
We usually hear that verse on a greeting card in December. How does a prophecy about cosmic government relate to a devotional on personal character transformation?
Because it represents the ultimate surrender of autonomy. If the government, meaning the ultimate authority, the strategic direction, the final say over the trajectory of your life is resting on his shoulders, then it is no longer resting on yours.
Oh, that makes sense.
Acknowledging that reality is the zenith of God consciousness. You resign your exhausting commission as the CEO and PR manager of your own universe, and you submit to his righteous administration.
And the second passage is 1 Corinthians 6.1620, which delivers the ultimate reality check. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit? You are not your own. You were bought at a price.
This obliterates the concept of a private secular life. If your physical body is the literal residence of the divine, there's nowhere you can go to escape the audience of God.
You can't just leave it at the door.
No, you cannot leave the temple to go engage in corrupt commerce, because the temple is walking into the boardroom with you. The realization that you are not your own is the lethal blow to self-importance.
It is a total, terrifying, and ultimately liberating paradigm shift. Let's trace the arc of what we have uncovered today through today's Word for You devotional by Pastor Prosper Anang.
We have mapped a very comprehensive architecture of human transformation.
We started by identifying the soul-crushing weight of moral PR management and how the law of addition demands we build an actual structure, layering virtue, knowledge, and self-control over our foundational faith.
We established that this structure must be violently tested in the crucible of perseverance, moving our trust from the speculative to the experiential, which is the only way to forge true godliness.
We translated eusebia from an ancient term into a modern reality, realizing that godliness is the deep operating system of God consciousness, not the rugged external case of religious performance. We saw how it aligns the vertical, rewires the inward values from temporal to eternal, and organically produces outward integrity.
We analyzed the Isaiah principle, discovering that encountering absolute perfection doesn't destroy us, but rather initiates the liberating death of self-importance, allowing us to operate with authentic vulnerability in the marketplace and in our homes.
We navigated the 5-step pathway of cultivating silence, aggressively guarding our psychological diet, practicing immediate honesty, studying character over data, and embracing the ego-shattering practice of submitting to correction.
And finally, we examined the legislative power of declaring alignment, silencing the whisper of the double life and shifting our motivation from the terror of servile fear to the awe of filial reverence.
The text leaves us with a stark, uncompromising challenge. The world doesn't need more talented Christians. It needs more godly ones. It needs believers whose conduct testifies louder than their words. This entire exploration has been drawn from today's Word for You devotional by Pastor Prosper Anang.
It is an invitation to step off the stage, abandon the script, and live entirely in the reality of His presence.
So as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply uncomfortable thought experiment to test your own operating system. We have spent an hour dissecting the tension between the hidden life and the public performance. Imagine that tonight, a technological anomaly occurs. Every single private thought you had yesterday, every hidden motive behind your generous actions, every silent, bitter justification you made for cutting a corner, imagine all of that raw, unfiltered internal data was suddenly broadcast onto a massive cinema screen for your friends, family, and colleagues to watch.
That is a terrifying thought.
It is. Would that broadcast reveal the frantic, calculating exhaustion of a PR manager desperately trying to maintain an illusion, or would it reveal the quiet, integrated reality of genuine God consciousness? Because the truth of this text is that the screen is already turned on, the broadcast is live, but the ultimate viewer is not a hostile crowd waiting to cancel you. It is a presence of infinite, sanctifying grace. What changes about your behavior tomorrow if you stop performing for the crowd and start living entirely for the audience of one?